Thank you. Recognize Representative Massie of Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bunce, at first I wasn't sure as an engineer how to take your comment that if you put 5 engineers in a room, you get 7 answers, but I've decided that you're just characterizing them as overachievers, and I don't need any further comment on that. But you did elucidate several of the problems that are facing general aviation today. I want to give you a chance to offer some solutions. I know you've already mentioned some already, but if there's some other solutions that we might take into consideration, please give them to us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Massie, and our mutual friend Dan Swin, I'm sure would be agreeable to the disagreement between engineers and that.
Well, if one of the 5 engineers is from MIT, just take his answer.
There you go.
Okay.
But one of the solutions I think is, you can't fix it unless you measure it. And what we're seeing in some of the aircraft certification offices out there is before pre-pandemic, we got response time from the FAA down to about 30 days on the average. We have one ACO that just told the company it's now 120 days before we're going to get back to you on when we go and put an issue paper forward, and they have to respond to it. Now, 120 days, think about that. 4 months, how can we as industry deal with something like that? Because you've got a burn rate because you're not selling any product while you're trying to develop it, and just to get this back and forth answer, whether it's 90 days or 120 days. So what we can do, more resources for them, but also try to cut down this response time and be able to say, okay, are you measuring it, FAA? We want to report back to this committee on what you're doing to fix that. And a lot of it is processes. And I think, if the new administrator is confirmed there, that's one thing we hope he takes on as a task, is looking at his processes across the agency and saying, okay, how can we right this ship and get this flight path corrected so that we can help industry innovate? Because innovation relates directly to safety.
I think in a couple years, you're going to look like a prophet talking about the spectrum issue and mentioning that there are going to be further conflicts that are going to come up. I mean, it's inevitable. The value of the spectrum, if you look at the prices at the auctions, have increased by 2 orders of magnitude since the 80s and the 90s when these systems were first developed, and our ability, engineering-wise, to segment that spectrum has increased by an order of magnitude. Can you tell us where some of the other collisions you think are going to happen? Not arbitrary. I mean, these are driven by the markets and by the value of the spectrum, but you mentioned another one, GPS, that might occur?
Yes, sir. If you think about GPS satellite, I think it's operating at a very low wattage rate. It's 210 watts or whatever. So it's like a light bulb out in space. So it takes very little to overwhelm our receivers. And receivers, we may have, in both the airlines and civil aviation, we may have a receiver that was one of the earlier generations of GPS versus some of the later ones where the filters are not as good. So once they start transmitting right next to our spectrum, they're going to interfere, and then we're going to have to spend a lot of money, or we'll be regulated from certain type of approaches if we don't get that fixed. Now, one thing that the satellite receiver folks got through the big sale of the spectrum, I think it was $80 billion sale, was part of it was compensation for them to help migrate away so that they wouldn't have the impact from the 5G. And I think as we look to sale of spectrum, which you're exactly right, is precious, and we want the U.S. to move forward. We're not trying to fight that, but if it's going to affect us in aviation, which takes years and years to certify a new product, is there a way to compensate that and think ahead of time so we can have the widgets available to be able to have a rapid plug-in to new aircraft or existing aircraft, but also have a way to help compensate folks that have to do that?
I'm going to give other folks a chance to answer this question. We know there's a shortage of chips, and that's affecting general aviation. Are there shortages of other things that people could let us know about that are going to affect GA?
Member Massie, if I may, regarding workforce, the contract tower program is suffering from a significant shortage of viable workforce, some of which, culmination of factors, some of which driven by recruitment to the FAA staff towers. Secondly, the wages are out of alignment with Department of Labor, and I know there's been effort on this subcommittee, which we greatly appreciate. So some controllers are making difficult financial decisions, best for them and their families, and the Contract Act would go a long way towards helping those efforts. Coordination with the FAA on a transition of a recruitment from a contract tower, backfill vacancies, go to the FAA would help a great deal. It's all part of one NAS.
Thank you. My time's expired. It wasn't the answer I anticipated, but it was a good answer. Thank you very much. I yield back.